I served on the House Homeland Security Committee for 3 years. I know the difference between a counter-narcotics operation and an oil grab. What happened in Venezuela on January 3rd wasn't about fighting cartels or saving American lives from drugs. It was about seizing control of the world's largest proven oil reserves for American corporations. And I was the only Republican in Congress willing to say it. Let me walk you through the numbers that prove this was never about drugs. Fentanyl is responsible for over 70% of American drug overdose deaths. Cocaine accounts for maybe 15%. Fentanyl comes from Mexican cartels using chemical precursors from China and trafficked across the U.S.-Mexico border. Cocaine comes primarily from Colombia, not Venezuela. If this military operation was really about saving American lives from deadly drugs, why didn't we take action against Mexican cartels first? Why didn't we target the Chinese chemical suppliers enabling fentanyl production? Why did we skip over the countries actually killing Americans to launch regime change against a country with the world's largest oil reserves? The answer is obvious to anyone willing to look past the propaganda, because this was never about drugs. It was about oil. And oil means money, lots of money. Let me tell you what I learned during my years on Homeland Security about how these operations really work. They always start with a humanitarian justification. We're fighting drugs. We're stopping human trafficking. We're promoting democracy. The American people are told we're the good guys fighting bad guys. But then you look at what actually happens after the military operations end. Somehow American energy companies always end up with control of the natural resources. Somehow defense contractors always get reconstruction contracts. Somehow the humanitarian crisis we supposedly solved gets worse while corporate profits get better. I watched this pattern in Iraq. I watched it in Libya. I watched it in Syria. And now I'm watching it again in Venezuela, except this time I was supposed to stay quiet and support the party line instead of pointing out the obvious. Here's what Trump announced after the Venezuela operation. The United States will now run the country until a transition can be secured. He specifically mentioned that American companies will get preferential access to Venezuelan oil at market prices. That's not fighting cartels. That's colonial occupation for corporate benefit. By removing Maduro, this was a clear move for control over Venezuelan oil supplies that will ensure stability for the next obvious regime change war in Iran. It's the same playbook every time. Create instability, launch military operations, install friendly governments, hand over resource control to connected American businesses. I couldn't stay silent about this pattern anymore, not when it violates everything we campaigned on about America First foreign policy. America First means American soldiers fight for American security, not for corporate oil profits. It means American taxpayers fund operations that benefit American families, not operations that benefit energy company shareholders. What we did in Venezuela benefits ExxonMobil, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips. It doesn't benefit the American families struggling with inflation, housing costs, and healthcare expenses. Those families need their government focused on domestic problems, not on seizing foreign oil fields for multinational corporations. The hypocrisy of this operation is staggering when you consider what we're not doing to address the actual drug crisis. We could secure the Mexican border tomorrow if we wanted to stop fentanyl trafficking. We could sanction Chinese chemical companies supplying cartels. We could fund treatment programs for American communities devastated by addiction. Instead, we launched military operations against a country that isn't a major source of the drugs actually killing Americans, but happens to have the largest oil reserves on Earth. What a coincidence. And here's the part that should outrage every American who voted for change in 2024. This is exactly the kind of foreign intervention we campaigned against. This is exactly the kind of regime change operation that voters rejected when they chose America First over America Last foreign policy. But the moment it serves corporate interests, suddenly regime change is good again. Suddenly military intervention is necessary. Suddenly we need to spend billions of taxpayer dollars and risk American soldiers' lives for operations that sound exactly like the Iraq War, except with different justifications. I've seen the classified briefings about Venezuelan drug operations. The threat level doesn't justify this scale of military response. The drug interdiction benefits don't justify this level of investment. The only thing that justifies this operation is the profit potential for American energy companies. That's not America first. That's America last disguised as America first. It's putting corporate profits ahead of American security, taxpayer resources ahead of domestic priorities, and energy industry demands ahead of the foreign policy voters actually supported. When I pointed this out, I was told I was being disloyal to the administration. I was told I was helping Democrats by questioning military operations. I was told I should trust the president's judgment instead of doing my constitutional duty to provide oversight. But Congress exists to prevent exactly this kind of executive overreach. We exist to ask hard questions about military operations. We exist to demand transparency about why American soldiers are being deployed and who benefits from their deployment. I took an oath to defend the Constitution, not to defend corporate oil profits. I took an oath to represent American taxpayers, not to provide cover for energy industry colonialism. I took an oath to serve American families, not to serve multinational business interests. That oath required me to speak the truth about Venezuela, even when that truth was politically inconvenient, even when it meant breaking with party leadership, even when it meant being attacked by people who prioritize political loyalty over American interests. The drug war excuse for Venezuela would be laughable if it weren't so dangerous. Venezuela produces maybe 200 tons of cocaine per year. Colombia produces over 1,000 tons per year. Peru produces over 400 tons per year. If we were really fighting cocaine production, we'd start with the countries actually producing most of the cocaine. But Colombia and Peru don't have 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. Venezuela does. That's the real difference. That's why Venezuela got regime change while other countries get foreign aid and cooperation agreements. I understand why the energy industry wants Venezuelan oil. I understand why defense contractors want Venezuelan reconstruction contracts. I understand why foreign policy establishment wants to prove they can still topple governments anywhere they choose. What I don't understand is why Republican voters are supposed to support this agenda when it contradicts everything we campaigned on about ending foreign wars and focusing on domestic priorities. We were supposed to be the party that learned from Iraq and Libya. We were supposed to be the party that stopped believing humanitarian justifications for military interventions that serve corporate interests. We were supposed to be the party that put America first instead of ExxonMobil first. But the moment there's oil to be seized and defense contracts to be awarded, suddenly we forget everything we learned about the costs of regime change. Suddenly we start sounding like John McCain and Hillary Clinton, explaining why this intervention will be different from all the previous interventions. It won't be different. It never is. The pattern is always the same. Promise quick victory, encounter unexpected resistance, expand the mission, increase the costs, blame the critics, and eventually declare success while leaving behind chaos and instability. Except this time, American energy companies will profit from the chaos. This time, the instability serves corporate purposes. This time, the failure will be economically beneficial to the right people, even if it's strategically disastrous for American security. I couldn't be part of that pattern anymore. I couldn't provide Republican cover for Democratic foreign policy just because it's being implemented by a Republican administration. I couldn't pretend that regime change serves American families when it obviously serves American corporations. The Venezuela operation violated every principle of America First governance. It prioritized corporate profits over taxpayer interests. It risked American soldiers for foreign resource control. It expanded military commitments when we should be reducing them. Most importantly, it proved that the foreign policy establishment successfully captured another America First politician and turned him into another regime change president. The same people who designed the Iraq disaster designed the Venezuela operation. The same consulting firms that profited from Libyan chaos will profit from Venezuelan reconstruction. Nothing has changed except the rhetoric. The policies serve the same interests they always served. The operations benefit the same people they always benefited. The only difference is that now we're supposed to support those policies because they're being implemented by someone who campaigned against them. That's not America First. That's a bait and switch. It's using populist rhetoric to implement globalist policies. It's betraying the voters who supported change in order to serve the interests that oppose change. I refuse to be part of that betrayal. I refuse to pretend that Venezuelan regime change serves American families when it obviously serves Venezuelan oil reserves. I refuse to stay silent about operations that contradict everything we promised voters we'd do differently. The real drug crisis requires real solutions: secure borders, target actual trafficking routes, sanction Chinese chemical suppliers, fund treatment programs, prosecute cartel networks operating in American cities. None of those solutions require regime change in oil-rich countries. None of them require military occupation of foreign governments. None of them require handing over natural resources to American corporations. But all of them require admitting that the Venezuela operation was never about drugs and always about oil. And apparently that's a truth too politically inconvenient for anyone else in the Republican Party to acknowledge. So I'll acknowledge it, because American families deserve honesty about why their tax dollars are funding corporate oil grabs. Because American soldiers deserve honesty about why they're being deployed to secure energy resources instead of American security. And because America First voters deserve to know when America First politicians start implementing America Last policies while hoping nobody notices the difference.